Shalom, friends. We're entering into now the second parsha of the year. Last week we began first, Bereshit, the story of creation. We read of God creating all of the constellations in the universe, God creating light and darkness, water and firmaments, God creating ultimately the land and the fertility of the land, and the animals that went on the land, and then in the final stage, God created humanity. But the pinnacle of creation was not humanity. The pinnacle of creation was what followed humanity, Shabbat, the opportunity to be able to resist the temptations of life to do things, and instead sit, learn, absorb, pray, learn Torah. This is what Shabbat is for, so that what we bring into the next week will not be either redundancy or repetitiveness of what has happened in the previous week, month, years, and decades of our life. A Shabbat has that very purpose built into it. A moment of reflection and not creation. And then what we see in the aftermath of this gift to us is humanity doesn't respect it. The degradation of humanity, it just goes in a downward spiral with fratricide and people treating each other with terrible indignities until God ultimately despairs of having created humanity. And what we find in the Torah at the end of the book of Bereshit is V'yityasev elibo. God became tremendously sad at what he had created. V'yinachem. And he regretted having created humanity. Can you imagine such thoughts being attributed to the Master of the Universe, that God became sad because of what we were doing to each other, what we had become? Now, clearly, we haven't been given a whole lot of marching orders. God hadn't told us to do this or not to do that. But there's a common sense, isn't there, that is innate to every human being about not hurting one another, about being generous and about being kind, which humanity apparently needs to be told and enforced, which is why God ultimately decides to start with a new Adam. Who is this new Adam? He is called Noah, because Noah found favor in God's eyes, the Torah says, and he was a tzaddik b'dorotav. He was a tzaddik. He not only knew the right thing to do, because everybody else does as well, but he did the right thing. And that's the difference between a tzaddik and a non-tzaddik. We all know what the right thing to do is. We all know what God wants of us. We all know what the commandments are, the mitzvot are. We all know that we're supposed to learn and grow and become greater than we were. But do we? Noah did. And so he became the new progenitor of humanity, Noah. And there's a great lesson that inheres in this. Two, actually. The first one is that God feels our pain and rejoices in our growth and victories. That God, as it were, weeps when we do wrong. I had the privilege of participating in a program this week at the State House where we were remembering, honoring those individuals who were the victims of domestic violence. Do you know that South Carolina, we rate 6th in the country for people who die as a result of domestic violence? Not something to be proud of. So when I was giving my benediction to the people in a very Jewish fashion, I was quoting the Torah by saying that God weeps. God weeps when we hurt each other. And there's astounding silence at that, because we do have tremendous power to affect not only each other, but to affect God as well. And the second moral that emerges out of this is that God is seeking for us to choose the right path, to change our lives in such a way so that we choose not only the morally correct choice, but ask, is this what God wants of me? And then start learning the difference between our own decisions of what we want to do versus what God would have us do, which is what the process of learning Torah is all about. Shabbat Shalom.